Sammy, I'm going to ask you, over the years when you started playing goal and you did play out, but to what degree was his goalie specialty instruction sort of taken over the development of goalies relative to the coach and designing his practices to match their needs and worry about their needs? And was there that much specialty training for you growing up? When you came to the national team, was it overwhelming? Was it too much? But because I know they do have a full-time goalie coach now, and they seem to be unbelievable technically. So, any comments, Sammy, historically on goalie coach evolution versus coaching goalie evolution?
For sure. So I think Peter had his hand up, but is yours to do with goalies too, Peter?
It is. It is. I just wanted to bring up a quick point, especially when working with the younger goaltenders, right? Always trying to get them involved. One of the things that I did, which honestly I did with my college team too, was the goaltender's opinion, if you will, making it, especially the younger levels, making them understand that, listen, you're kind of like the quarterback in American football. You see everything. So I want to be able to talk to you between periods and you tell me what you saw, what you see, because you see it from that unique perspective. And even all the way up to, like I say, to when I was coaching NCAA, one of my first questions between periods were always, I pull my goaltender aside and I say, what are you seeing? Can you share that with the boys? Can you share that with the team? Because you see the game better than anybody else. I'm on a, 25-foot long bench going up and down like a typewriter. That's all I get to see from that angle. But you literally get to see everything. So making the goaltenders feel value at the youngest level on up, that they are more than just a target, that they are more than just, oh, you shouldn't have let that one in, right? That they actually have some input, I think can go a long way to getting those kids involved, even when they're not touching a puck or seeing a shot. It keeps them engaged as players too, if they know you're going to be talking to them in between periods, so that their voice matters.
That's a great point, Peter. And I think what I wouldn't necessarily say goalies see it better. I would say they see it so different, because it is a different angle. I think, you guys have a unique perspective too. And that's why I think a lot of goalies end up as analysts on TV, is that it is so different. So it's kind of, we're not seeing what everybody else is seeing. My husband, who's just a pure goal scorer, will watch the same play. And for me, it'll be like, I'll just simply be watching the goalie moving and making a great save, and he'll have seen the play develop and things happen. So you're just watching it from totally different angles. So Peter, I think that's really great that the goalies are engaged in that way. And I love what you said, that just simply to make them feel valued. I think that that's so important. So Wally, back to your point of the evolution of goalie coaching. My first exposure really to goalies was watching Hockey Night in Canada. So I would mimic them. I would actually sit and watch and draw all the goalies and the moves they made, because I was very artistic. And so I love that side of it. And then the first book that was available at my library was Vladislav Tretiak's book, and he had The Art of Goaltending. And it talked about his style, but also his off-ice training. And so that was really my Bible. I loved that. That was the only thing I really saw. And so I just kind of followed that. I had one coach when I was 11 years old who printed out sheets from a Ken Dryden book for me to read. So that was really exciting, just to see other goalies' perspectives. And then when I played boys AAA and then went away to college, I did play in the ACHA, but by no means do people go to California to play hockey. So we had a really great coach down there, in Ernie Ferrari at Stanford, who, I think he led us to the third place in the ACHA, but there was his idea of goalie coaching was having me watch Miracle over and over. So that when I joined the national team in 97 was the tryouts, when Wally had me come out. I had never seen goalie coaching, and my very first practice, I was a thrower at Stanford, so discus and javelin, and obviously used to lifting heavy weights, but certainly not cardio based. And the team went and did 4 laps of the oval on the track, right? So that's, probably a couple miles. And I thought that was the workout. I mean, I was gassed and exhausted, and both goalies, Menno Reom and Leslie Redden, lapped me. I was with some of the girls, but they were just so cardio based. I mean, they were so exceptionally talented when it came to that. And I thought that was the whole workout, and that was simply the warm up. And I was gassed. And we went into the weight room, and then, I could bench press a fair amount, and most of the girls were bench pressing the bar at that point. So I didn't see how I could become a goaltender at that level, because that wasn't the body type I was seeing. And really the first time that I learned, I would say that I played that 98 year with Wally. We didn't have goalie coaching in 98. The first time that we had a goalie coach was Dave Jamieson in 2001, leading into the 2002 Olympics. And we had Andy Norwicki, I think, a little bit before that, but he had to leave to go to the Kings. I learned how to butterfly. I mean, I had never learned how to butterfly prior to that. So that just gives you a perspective of, being at that point, 22 years of age, I guess, leading into that, probably into the Olympics, and never being exposed one time. But that doesn't mean that I didn't become a student of the game. And I think what that it did is it forced me to go. Over the years, there was more library books, there was more purchases made. I analyzed goalies on TV. I would watch the other goalies. So I learned so much from Menno and Leslie as to not just how to train, but what they did around the net, the moves that they would make. And then when Kim St. Pierre came in, who had a totally different style and had this like Quebec style I had never really seen except for Patrick Roy on TV, I would watch what she did. So I think what we had to do as goalies in the past was to really become a student of the game. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the way to go, because I think it leaves a lot of kids behind who aren't, but it certainly did accelerate my learning process, I would say. So I would say from 2002 then on to 2006, they started to have more of a full-time person. So 2002, Dave Jamieson was a high school teacher, and he would just fly in once a week for a weekend. By the time 2006 rolled around, we had Dave, but we also had Dennis Broxton, who was local from Red Deer, who would come in during the week. So there's more thought to the goalies. And I think that just accelerated. I mean, I learned so much in that time frame. But I also, my last year on the national team was 2008. And then I started to go to see a goalie coach here in Toronto. It was my first time. And I think because of that, it just renewed my interest in wanting to learn and wanting to find out what was going on with all these new techniques, but also being okay with having the 10-year-old on the ice being better than me, and knowing that I could learn it, and that I just had to put in the time and the effort. And being a thrower who was really used to the minutia of the biomechanics of sport, that was, as a track and field athlete, that's what we sort of lived and breathed. It really, I found really exciting. So because I never remade the national team, but I was able to play professionally for another 12 years, thanks to that goalie coach here, who I would go see twice a week. So I think, I kind of wish I had that earlier. I think it was detrimental perhaps to my hips and my long-term sort of ability to recover from injury. But in the end, I think it was a good process for me, because I didn't get burnt out too early or too young. And now goalie coaching, now that I am a goalie coach, I think we're going in another direction, and that is to think of goalies more like pitchers. So a baseball pitcher. So how many reps is the goalie doing? And how can we make goalies, think the game, see the game, perform in practice, but not be overburdened so that they are injured when they're 20, 22. So really thinking about long-term injury management for goalies. And, this was new when I went to the elite goalie seminar in Calgary, whatever it's called, the 4-day where you get your certification. I went there this summer, and that was really revolutionary to me to think about. Yeah, we don't need to do 1,000 butterflies in a week. You know, how can we make it so that you're still learning and you're still getting the most out of it, but it's more like a javelin thrower or a pitcher or a quarterback. So I feel like that's where it's evolved to. And there's so many more great minds in the game now that are thinking about all these things. And it ebbs and flows for sure. I mean, you go from, I think in my day in 98, I stood on the goal line and just tried to react to every puck. And then all of a sudden you had to be out, and then you had to be over moving, and then you had to curtail it. And then we're back to a conservation of movement now. I think that, it's kind of stabilized a little bit. So anyways, I could talk goalies all day. I'm sorry. I just took over this conversation and moved it into a goalie direction. Richard, we're probably talking about something completely different, but I apologize.
Well, Sami, I think the discussion, and welcome, Hal, the discussion on goalies. When we were coaching, Hal, I think goalies just learn by trial and error.
Did we have a goalie coach in 98? Wally, we didn't, did we?
No, we didn't. As Sami, I wanted
you were my goalie coach. I feel like you taught us a lot of techniques that I used for 20 years after that.
Well, I used to run a hockey school, and I picked up 12 stations created by Seth Martin, a hero in Europe, goaltender for the Trail Smoke Eaters. And I used those stations at hockey school. I didn't bring out a goalie instructor, but I did teach the person at each station the proper teaching points of the elements of those stations. And it was at that time, Sami, that I got the call from Kathy Berg to see if you could skate with the pros. And you guys, the guys here would know the name Skorodensky and Clint Malarchuk. They were our goalies. And so when you bring in a third goalie, and it sort of interrupts their love of shots, because they weren't like pitchers. They just wanted shots after shots after shot. But they agreed, and Sami stopped pucks, period. And that was the big difference. She stops pucks. I wasn't looking at technique at all.
Good, it's a good thing, because I had none.
But she battled, and to the point where she was as good in that particular evening, better than both of them, and they said so. So it did get her to come, Shannon Miller, to invite her to a camp and try out for the team, and I wasn't associated with it, but I was working with Team Japan, and I ran into Sami in the in Nagano at the lunch line at the cafeteria, and she was brought there as a third goalie. So I think that story is worth relating, Sami, because we're watching the goalies in the NHL today. They're so technical, and it's more a sports psychology position and how they manage their emotions to be at their best and not cope with the ups and downs of the position. But